Listen up, silver stackers and preppers out there. You need to be aware that all of your efforts to save silver, food, water, fuel, medicines, weapons, ammo, or just about anything can all be legally taken away from you by agencies of the government and redistributed in any way the government deems necessary. Yes, this is true. Federal and/or state emergency provisions are already on the books and in place to legally confiscate what the government deems as excessive to your personal needs and have it redistributed to other citizens who weren't insightful enough to prepare on their own. So if you've stocked up dry goods, food, water, or even extra boxes of ammo, a percentage of it can be taken from you without any due process whatsoever. How can this be? It all started with the Defense Production Act of the United States, a federal law enacted on September 8, 1950, in response to the start of the Korean War. It was part of a broad civil defense and war mobilization effort in the context of the Cold War. The act contains 3 major sections. The first authorizes the President to require businesses to sign contracts or fulfill orders deemed necessary for national defense. The second authorizes the President to establish mechanisms such as regulations, orders, or agencies to allocate materials, services, and facilities to promote national defense. The third section authorizes the President to control the civilian economy so that scarce and/or critical materials necessary to the national defense effort are available for defense needs. The Act also authorizes the President to requisition property, force industry to expand production and the supply of basic resources, impose wage and price controls, settle labor disputes, control consumer and real estate credit, establish contractual priorities, and allocate raw material towards national defense. Under Title I of this Act is Section 2072, and it is titled Hoarding of Designated Scarce Materials, and it states, "In order to prevent hoarding, no person shall accumulate in excess of reasonable demands of business, personal, or home consumption, or for the purpose of resale at prices in excess of prevailing market prices, materials which have been designated by the President as scarce materials or materials the supply of which would be threatened by such accumulation. The President shall order published in the Federal Register and in such other manners as he may deem appropriate every designation of materials the accumulation of which is unlawful, and any withdrawal of such designation. In making such designations, the President may prescribe such conditions with respect to the accumulation of materials in excess of the reasonable demands of business, personal, or home consumption as he deems necessary to carry out the objective of this Act." Section 2073 covers the penalties. Any person who willfully performs any act prohibited or willfully fails to perform any act required by the provisions of this article or any rule, regulation, or order thereunder shall, upon conviction, be fined not more than $10,000 or imprisoned for not more than 1 year or both. Under the provisions of this Act, the President can establish just about any item as critical and then determine the quantity of that item that is reasonable for business, personal, or home consumption, and then confiscate from any citizen the excess above that amount and have it redistributed as the government deems necessary. This Act has been amended by several presidents over the years to make it relevant with the times. In 1962, President John F. Kennedy amended Executive Order 10998, assigning emergency preparedness functions to the Secretary of Agriculture. This Cold War initiative was an end-of-the-world as we know it civil defense measure. It empowers the Secretary of Agriculture in time of national emergency to seize civilian and individual stockpiles of food and related agricultural supplies, including fertilizer, for the public good, and specifically for equitable distribution to individuals and organizations which have a governmental priority for such supplies. The full text for Presidential Executive Order 10998, assigning emergency preparedness functions to the Secretary of Agriculture, can be found here. Then, in 1994, President Bill Clinton issued an executive order that combined a number of laws that would take effect in the event martial law was declared. One of the laws included in his amendment of Executive Order 10998 permits the federal government to seize hoarded food supplies from both public and private holders. Further, in March of 2012, President Barack Obama signed the National Defense Resources-Preparedness Executive Order, which grants the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Labor, and the Department of Defense and other agencies complete control of all U.S. resources, including the ability to seize, confiscate, or redelegate resources, materials, services, and facilities as deemed necessary or appropriate to promote the national defense as delegated by the controlling agencies. Included in this order is all farming equipment, all forms of energy and energy production, food resources, and water resources. So under what circumstances can this law and these presidential executive orders be decreed? The answer is under a state of emergency or under martial law. And it really doesn't take much to establish a state of emergency. Any natural disaster, hurricane, typhoon, tsunami, earthquake, volcanic eruption, flood, you name it, and the president can declare a state of emergency and legally enact these powers. A declaration of martial law would require a state of rebellion or invasion. One could argue that we are currently in a state of invasion across our southern borders right now. Perhaps the facilitating of a border wall could reduce the chances of a future president declaring a condition of invasion that would allow martial law to be so easily imposed. It's also important to note that any declaration of martial law would essentially nullify any constitutional protections and civil rights that might inhibit the government from self-preservation and the preservation of the civil society. So what can we do? First, understand your vulnerability and realize that the confiscation of your personal property is not only possible, but most likely probable if there is ever a declaration for a state of emergency or martial law. Use the links provided to read and study these laws so that you know what you're up against. They are difficult to understand, as I'm sure they were designed that way, so don't be discouraged. Read through them and research them until you understand exactly how they essentially strip your constitutional rights away from you. Second, if you're a prepper or a silver stacker, keep it to yourself. The less who know, the better your chances of not being discovered. Third, don't think you can just shoot your way out of it to protect your personal property. The military, Homeland Security, all the three-letter agencies, and even the local police forces are organized, very well equipped, and heavily armored. If they decide to take down an objective, it will happen. Fourth, keep your resources in multiple geographic locations so that if one portion is compromised, it won't devastate your ability to support your family. And fifth, get clever. Hide your resources well. Take the time now to make hiding places behind a false wall, under floorboards. You might be able to dig out an additional storage space in your basement, or bury multiple 55-gallon storage drums in key locations where you can resupply from. Whatever you feel is necessary to preserve your resources and keep it from being discovered and confiscated. Good luck. Was this information useful to you? Let me know in the comment section below. A big thank you to all who support this channel, especially to those who take the time to like and comment. As I choose not to monetize my channel, your support by commenting is greatly appreciated. If you're not yet a subscriber, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, and then select the notification bell to be notified as soon as I post up new content.